IBM. Right, so do you want to know some companies he did control in Germany? How about Lufthansa, which is now an airline that's been privatized? Hugo Boss, which made all the Volkswagen, which means people's car. Porsche, these were government-run enterprises.
Hugo Boss was government. He made uniforms for them, but he wasn't run by the government.
So let's all cap this up. I want to get to more disagreement. You're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. Thank you very much for that. Hello, how are you?
I came here to win. This is hilarious. It's like Twitter in my life. Anyway, I actually do think Hitler was a socialist, and so was Mussolini, who's basically his mentor. I can't really stomach that Mein Kampf crap, but I'm totally evil. I have read Giovanni Gentili, Mussolini stuff, and that's pretty much just, you know, the Communist Manifesto reworded. Like, a lot of it is pretty much just, like you said, collectivism. And leftism, fundamentally, that is to say, communism, is just the idea, recycled that is, that we should take other people's stuff for ourselves and justify it through some moral garbage. That being said, my real question was, I'm actually pretty anti-immigration. I'm from California, and my home state, since the Immigration Act of 1965, has gone to shit. And it's mainly because of mass immigration. That's just an undeniable fact. It's changed the voting trends, it's changed the makeup of LA, it's changed San Francisco, it's changed the hometown of Santa Cruz, California, and it's brought with it, and I'll give you this, mainly due to insecure borders as well, a whole host of enormous problems. But, you know, the fact that LA went from being a predominantly English-speaking city to now one that speaks like 100 different languages, and is culturally divided beyond all recognition.
Well, so thank you for the question. I push back a little bit, though, respectfully. I think this growing anti-immigration portion of the Republican conservative movement is dangerous. First, we have to let's make a huge distinction. Difference between coming here legally and border jumping. Huge difference. What illegals did to get into America is not moral and is not sustainable for a country. However, I do believe that what makes America different and what will continue to make America exceptional is that the best, the brightest, and the most aspirational from all over the planet Earth should be able to get a shot to come legally. If you come here the correct way. The porous southern border has contributed to the downfall of California. 10 million people coming illegally. What's unfortunate, though, and here's the immorality of border jumping and line cutting, people from all across the country, from Thailand to Angola, all across the world, I should say, from Thailand to Angola to Europe, they don't have the opportunity to border jump. They have to wait in line. They have to go to their embassy. They can't just conveniently go north to America. That's not fair, and the left always like to talk about fairness. This country was built by immigrants. This country is a shining city on the hill for immigrants. Legal immigrants. So we have to reiterate that.
Exactly. But is, what is it, 1.1 million per year a sustainable number? The question is, for a country that is only 300 million people, that means before I die, more than 60 million foreigners will come in who will bring their culture with them. That's just a fact.
Here's the better question is, the immigrants that are they coming with skills? Are they coming with very specific...
80% of immigrants vote Democrat.
Well, I actually don't think you should design immigration policy based on politics. I think that's actually, I don't think you should.
Okay, but
it's very dangerous. But I think that, for example, if someone graduates from a U.S. university, Stanford, UC Berkeley, and we send them back to Korea or to Japan, it doesn't make any sense. They should be given a green card or a visa upon graduation. We have more intellectual exporting to other countries from our own universities. So the 20 top research universities on the planet, 18 of the top 20 are here in America. But so I'll push back a little bit because I think what makes this country so different and should continually is that the embracing of coming from somewhere else to be able to achieve your dreams here. Now, you're somewhat blurring it between legal and illegal immigration.
Well, I don't have a problem with green cards. What I have a problem with is bringing in 1.1 million new citizens per
But
year
they're
in
not
the country.
citizens. There's a difference. You're conflating green cards with citizenship. We don't inaugurate a million citizens every year. We don't. So,
Yeah, we do. Just look at the numbers. Look, how many people have immigrated to the United States since 1965?
It's roughly about 400,000 a year, more or less.
But
It's
how many
about
since
half.
1965?
Roughly about 400,000 a year.
60 million is the number you're getting.
Right.
60 million people have been let into the United
There were
States
certain
since
spikes
1965.
Reagan gave amnesty.
And another 60 million will be let in before I die. Is that a sustainable amount
I
for
think it
any
is.
first world country?
So let me tell you, I think that this dystopian future that is sometimes painted, I'm not accusing you of this because you're coming at it from a thoughtful position, that we're going to run out of resources.
No.
I'm not saying you're saying that. I even prefaced it. However, there is a dystopian picture. When an immigrant entrepreneur comes with an idea and comes here to take a risk, basic economics will tell you that it's a net benefit for everybody.
Well, of course, otherwise we wouldn't have Elon Musk.
Right, Elon Musk or Peter Thiel. Right, so I want the next million Elon Musks. And so if we had an immigration system that operated similar to the Kentucky basketball recruiting, I want the best, smartest people on the planet here in America.
I just think
Rather wonky, so I want to get to the next question. So, no, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, if you disagree, please come to the front of the lectern. So I don't think we've had any problem with that so far. So,
Hey Charlie, first of all, I say I respect your charisma a lot. I respect your charm, but I do have some criticisms of you. For example, I think you cave a lot to the left, a little too much. You seem to, while you claim to be against identity politics, your organization seems to play into left identity politics. Like you have a black leadership summit, a Latino leadership summit. Why can't you either have none or else include whites? And I'm not even alt-right or anything. I'm Jewish, but why can't you I don't know, stop giving in to the left, stop the right needs to stand up more.
I get this question a lot. Thank you for asking it. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Now hosting the Black Leadership Summit for 2 years. There's a distinct black culture in America. A distinct black culture with issues and challenges that I simply have not experienced and I can't sympathize with. I can tell you what comes out of our Black Leadership Summit. Real action. Real dedicated action plans to go back into churches and talk about the Judeo-Christian fabric of our country. There is a cultural element in the Latino community in America too. So think less about racial identity politics, think more about culture. Number two, I never believe anyone should think a certain thing based on their skin color, ever. That is identity politics. In fact, to liberate the wrongful prejudice that is put on by the left, that somebody who is black somehow cannot think differently than the left. That is a prejudice that exists in America. And so what the summit does is it allows people, and we've seen it work absolute unbelievable wonders, where people come and they say, Charlie, I've never been on a plane before. I never thought I'd get to Washington, D.C., let alone the White House. I'm now going to run for office. I'm going to run for Congress. I'm more dedicated to do something. Because they were able to sympathize and see that, for example, the fatherlessness rate in the black community is 74%. 74%. Where I come from, the suburbs of Chicago, the fatherless rate is 11%. It's a huge cultural difference. I mean, the biggest issue where I grew up in the suburbs was getting into the best college you want to go to. The biggest issue in the south side of Chicago, that's not the biggest issue in the south side of Chicago. It's not. And learning and hearing and seeing that, and I think far too often, and I understand the question, I get it a lot, far too often I think we as conservative libertarians have not done a good enough job going into the inner cities, going into Latino neighborhoods, cultures that I believe are actually more naturally conservative than we ever give them credit for. So I appreciate the question. Push back a little bit. Thank you for being here tonight. So, thank you.
My name's Olivia, and first I just wanted to say thank you for giving me an outlet to learn more about the Republican side, because right now it's very hard to be a student in a world full of mostly Democratic. And so beside that, I my biggest problem isn't climate change, my biggest problem isn't socialism. I have a problem when people bring babies into politics to push their agenda. And so I just want to talk about pro-life really quick. I did an essay on it last year, and I went into Margaret Sanger's history about how she murdered millions of African Americans to push her agenda of women's reproductive rights. And so, I'll just get to the question. So, I want to know why birth control and abortions should be free when none of our other amendments are given to us freely. So we have to pay to put a paper out. We have to get to a platform that's not given to us freely. We have to pay to get a gun. So why should abortions and birth control, why are they thinking that that should also be free if that's not even a part of...
So first of all, just to be clear, not defending the Republican Party here, we're talking about conservative ideas. We're nonprofits, we stay very focused on conservative.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I just want to make sure that's very clear to the audience and everyone that's here. Secondly, so the birth control, of course, should be free. It should be free. Someone shouldn't have to pay for something that you think is a good idea or someone else thinks is a good idea. That's sacrificing liberty. That's sacrificing freedom, especially something that violates your moral conscience, especially that. And you make a fair point. In order to publish a newspaper, you have to pay for that cost. In order to defend yourself with a firearm, you have to pay for that cost. And there's a much longer argument if someone wants to challenge my pro-life stance. That's a longer thing at a different time.
I don't want to try it.
No, that's fine. If you want to, fine. But Margaret Sanger was a bitter racist.
A bit?
A bitter.
Oh, I thought you said a bit. I was like,
No, she was a bitter racist.
Bitter.
Sorry. Margaret Sanger was a bitter racist who was a eugenicist who founded Planned Parenthood. The black abortion rate now far exceeds the black birth rate in New York City. So that means if you see a pregnant black woman in New York City, she is more likely heading to Planned Parenthood than eventually heading to the delivery room.
Right.
The black birth rate has flatlined since the abortion clinics have spread all across America. So as a portion of the United States population, black America has not grown since the mid-1960s or mid-1970s. This was Margaret Sanger, a bitter racist. This was her dream.
Yeah.
Her dream was to keep black birth rates down.
Right.
And unfortunately, she's been able to succeed. And so anyway, we can talk about that at length. I do appreciate the question.
I was able to even find a letter by her really quick that was to CJ somebody, and she literally said our plan is to exterminate the Negroes.
Yes.
And so I just wanted
Thank you for your question.
Good job.
Hi, Charlie.
How are you?
How are you doing? Having a good day?
Yeah, how are you? What's your name?
Deshaya.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I don't disagree with a lot of things you said, but I do disagree with the using your Black Summit to justify your actions, because you can put out your opinions and stuff like that, but I hate when somebody tries to come at you with, oh, you're a racist. It sounds like that one thing when they're like, oh no, I have a black friend. You feel me?
So I think it's a reasonable question. So I can ask respectfully the question. So there's a horrible person, a scumbag that is named Richard Spencer. Okay? This guy's a horrible person. Do you think Richard Spencer would put on a black leadership summit? Okay, so we agree on that. So what it was talking about, if I was this horrible thing you say I am, would as an organization you actually do this? And so that's the argument that is being made there. And I think it's a very valid and logical one.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out there, but that really wasn't a question. It wasn't a question. With the whole immigrant thing, you said that, we come, at some point you said, oh, you come and you work hard. How about we work hard and it's a guarantee. Guarantee, that was the exact word you used, that we can get somewhere.
If you do four things, but go ahead.
But the whole, some of the immigrants, yeah, they may be illegal, but they do work really hard to come here and provide a life for their kids. And then they get snatched away, and their 9-year-old little girl is just sitting there crying and bawling her eyes out why her mom can't be with her after her mom just tried really hard to work really hard for her life.
Okay, so a couple things. If you break the law to get into America, you're putting your kid's life in jeopardy too.
That's right.
Justice is blind. Justice can be something that must be equally interpreted. When that beautiful statue of Lady Justice, she has a cloth over her eyes, because justice is supposed to be blind. You know what happens to a legal immigrant? Let's say a legal immigrant from Indonesia. If they want to come to America, they have to prove to the embassy in America that they have not committed a crime for 2 years. If they get sometimes a speeding ticket equivalent in Indonesia or in Korea, their visa will be yanked almost instantaneously. So we have a double standard immigration system. One, where the rest of the world has to operate with a clean bill of health criminally, that they can't break any laws in their home country and they can't break any laws here because they might be subject to deportation or not coming into the country. And we have a whole different set of laws if you jump across the border. That's not fair and it's not sustainable. Because what now ends up happening is you have anywhere between 15 to 21 million people, could be even more than that, where they're living in the shadows. And that's not a good thing. I don't want that to happen. I mean, if I had my way, I would say, yeah, of course, I would love to have as many people in this country as possible. But it also severely disenfranchises the 180 other countries across the world that equally want to be here just as much, that are not within economic proximity there. So I understand the question. The other thing is this. There's isolated incidents of the United States government through ICE going after child sex traffickers, MS-13 members. But there is not mass deportations happening in this country right now. It's just not happening. Should we go after people that are smuggling guns and smuggling drugs and smuggling children? Oh my goodness, yes. Final thing is this. The porous southern border allows immoral behavior to continue. Evil behavior. Children that get smuggled across the southern border. Opioids, heroin, guns. MS-13 runs the entire southern border. This is why they fight so hard against the construction of a southern border wall. 95% of Border Patrol agents, half of which are Hispanic, by the way. The Border Patrol agents always get such a bad rap, but half of them are Hispanic. 95% of Border Patrol agents say a wall would help them better do their job to confiscate drugs and intercept children that might be in the midst of child sex trafficking. So anyway, I appreciate the question. My stance on immigration is this. Legal immigrants, huge positive, huge surplus for this country. You even saw me defend having more immigrants come to America. Border jumping and line cutting, it's not who we are, breaks the law, and it should not be tolerated. So, thank you.
For the ones that are trying to get here legally and it's not happening.
So I think we should have an unlimited amount of genius visas and an unlimited amount of merit visas. So if you are able to prove that you have a very specific skill, and there are anywhere between 30 to 40 million people like this worldwide, I think you should be able to give them a chance to come into America. We have huge capacity in this country, massive amount of natural resources, usually, and guess what? I get people in the conservative movement that push back against this. Charlie, we're full. Okay, I know this sounds silly. Fly from Chicago to Reno and tell me that we're full, okay? 3.5 hours. You know, there's massive amounts of land and huge development that we can have. I believe that the only limiting factor we have is saying that ideas will somehow run out. There are studies to show that a steady flow of immigrants keep a country on its toes. It keeps a country working hard and taking risks, and it keeps other people competing against them. I think that's a really healthy thing. Someone who believes so firmly in markets, I want people that always have new business ideas. I want people that are willing to disrupt the status quo. I want the next hungry entrepreneur from Cuba or Venezuela or South Africa. That's why we have 85 out of 100 of the most valuable companies in the world. And so anyway, I would say to expand it should be much quicker than legal immigrants in the country and much easier. We've made it so hard, and the President of the United States says it correctly. We're going to have a very big wall with a big door, and I think we get back to the door so we understand that legal immigration is a healthy backbone to this country that we must celebrate. So thank you for your time. Hello.
Hi. So just to start, I'm an independent, so a liberal or anything. So my grandparents, they came here in the 1940s, and they came here with like $40 in their pocket.
Where did they come from?
They came from Haiti.
Awesome.
And they were able to build themselves up through real estate, and they were able to send all my aunts, uncles, and my mother to college, and now they're all graduated in their professions, and my mom became a doctor. So I'm pretty proud of like
That's the American dream.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And also, like, a lot of illegal immigrants account for like farming work and factory work in America, and it's because a lot of people in America are unwilling to do that sort of labor. And if we curb illegal immigration, how would you propose to solve the possible amount of like under?
Sure. So, seasonal work visas. It's that simple. Give seasonal work visas for people that are willing to do difficult agricultural work. So, all the seasonal work visas, you get a temporary social security number, you pay tax, you pay payroll tax, you pay income tax, we know who you are, you commit a crime, we know exactly that, and we deport you immediately. Now we have no idea. We have no idea. No one can possibly argue that that's a sustainable system for the country. So that's a very simple way, but in order for there to be seasonal visas, you have to have a restriction on people cutting the line. The restriction would be a wall. And that's a key element to redefine, not redefining, but restructuring our immigration system, which is so horribly and terribly broken. And I talk about a wall and people say, Charlie, why are you against immigration? I say, I literally have talked so much about the value of immigration. I'm against people that come here in defiance to our laws and come into the shadows and intentionally break United States immigration law. I think it's a disservice to people like your grandparents that came here in the 1940s from Haiti. That's what's best and most beautiful about this country, is people that came here legally. And so when they came here legally, they were registered in the system, they were able to pay taxes, buy a house, start a bank account, and now a couple generations later, would you say your life is better than their life was? Probably, right? And so you're the story of America. So when I talk about the guarantee of America, almost very few people in America, unless your grandfather was Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller, very few people have it worse today than your grandparents did. Very few, unless it was some type or something horrible happened, it's 99% of Americans have it better than your grandparents did. We have progressively been getting better and better. There's many reasons for that, but I appreciate the question. Seasonal visas would be the way to fix it. So, thank you. So, any disagreements about literally. So we have time. So let's go.
Hello, my name is James. So earlier you said that the U.S. Constitution was one of the greatest documents ever. But the greatest.
Political document, I'm sorry.
That's kind of where I disagree, because the U.S. Declaration of Independence is a pretty badass one too, I gotta say.
Well, I totally agree. The Declaration is awesome. I will say the Declaration had some racism towards Native Americans there, so I would say the Constitution was much more, I would say morally precise than that. The Declaration was a very, very formative document. But the greatest document ever written in the history of the world is the Bible. Make no mistake.
The question is, it's a common theme among right-wing politicians and people who identify with the right wing to be climate, not necessarily climate deniers, but to not necessarily believe many of the measurements proposed by the left to counteract climate change. Now, I totally agree. I read the New Green Deal. It was atrocious.
Trains to Hawaii, everybody. We're going to take trains to Hawaii.
But it would be foolish to try and say that many of the business and manufacturing activities going on, not necessarily in the U.S., but in places like China and unregulated countries, are causing negative impacts on the ecosystem surrounding them. So my question is, what is so bad about the United States leading the world, being the best country in the world in sustainable energy and keeping God's green earth green?
So, if I can ask you a question in response, what is the only country in the industrialized world that had a decrease in CO2 emissions in the last year?
United States.
Bingo. Why is that?
Because we're making an effort, we're conscious about it.
Somewhat, yeah, but natural gas. Natural gas. Unbelievably, it's so environmentally friendly. And look, the left-wingers will misrepresent it intentionally. Natural gas is a lot of the answers to a lot of our problems. You can have a net zero carbon emission natural gas system built in the next 5 to 10 years. And also the growth of solar. I think that conservatives far too often go after the solar industry. Now, I don't think we should subsidize solar, and I don't think we should subsidize oil either, mind you. So if you have a grid, right now our grid is between 3 to 4% solar. The biggest problem with solar is that we think the answer to solar is having a solar panel on everyone's roof. That's not the answer. The answer is instead having massive solar farms out in the middle of Nevada where they never have seen a cloud in the history of Elko. Have they ever seen a cloud in Elko? No, so there are places in Nevada that it's very sunny. It's like 310 days of sun. But you could build huge solar farms and you could pipe that energy all across the country. Misrepresented. Second thing is this: nuclear. Nuclear, I have to say it correctly. Nuclear gets totally misrepresented, and all the graphs, all the charts show it incorrectly. Because there was one horrible isolated incident that shows that the efficiencies were reported there. So let me give you another example. The United States, carbon emissions going down. 2% of carbon emissions went down. Germany had all this subsidized solar panel, all this anti-fossil fuel movement. They did not decrease their carbon emissions at all in the last couple of years. How is that possible? Because they had a war on natural gas. So in their quest to try to make the earth better, they've made it not better. And so natural gas, for those that don't know, if you open up a can of Coke, you open up a can of Sprite, it's the fizz that comes out of the earth when you dig for oil. Okay, that's what natural gas, that's the best way I can explain it. For you petroleum engineering majors out there, it's way more complicated than that. I know that, but I'm simplifying it, right? So it's actually, if you actually drive to the Permian Basin, you drive to North Dakota, you see flares at night? They're literally burning the gas because there's so much overflow. At times we don't even know what to do with it. We have found massive swaths of natural gas throughout Pennsylvania, throughout New York, Texas. It is so environmentally friendly, so much more than coal. And we are divesting naturally away from coal. Now, is it right to have an attack on coal miners? Of course not. And so we are actually on the correct path when it comes to carbon emissions. We are. What would have put us on the incorrect path is to sign that silly Paris Climate Accord, where it would have hampered our economy, could have killed anywhere between 500,000 to 700,000 jobs. China would have signed it, and they would have laughed their way all the way back to their smog-filled cities and never abided by it at all. Studies show as soon as a country hits about $5,000 GDP per person, they start to care about the environment. So the question should be, how do we lift most of the not yet industrialized world out of poverty? And the best way to do that is through fossil fuels. What is so amazing about fossil fuels, they will burn in the middle of the night, they'll burn in the winter, and they'll burn in the summer. It's durable. You can plan on it. Solar, not so much. Solar is expanding. You can pipe it all across the country. I think solar should be a bigger part of our grid. Here's the problem, is the left has determined they want to create an entire grid around solar and wind. Keep it all on the ground, they say. It's bad for U.S. jobs, it's bad for carbon emissions, and will hamper and hinder the U.S. economic potential going forward. So thank you for the question.
Charlie, my question is based on one fact. The fact is that there is a group in this country that is loyal to another country, a foreign country, and controls our media, our news, our entertainment, and unfortunately our Congress and every president since JFK. Can you guess what I'm referring to?
Well, if you're going to say this, really, you're wrong.
The Jewish power structure.
You're wrong. Don't move. Let's have a discussion.
Who controls the media, for instance?
People.
People.
Individuals.
Jewish people.
So, okay, no, guys, allow hateful ideas the chance to be challenged.
The New York Times owned by a Jewish family. And that's just the beginning. But you don't believe the Jews are powerful. Then that's sad.
No, I think the Jews take a high focus on education, which makes them more successful. They take family very seriously. I'll slow down, okay, I apologize. Jewish people have taken education very seriously for a very long time. They have some of the lowest divorce rates of any group in the history of the planet. They stick together very, very well. So because of that, Jews, especially Jewish Americans, tend to be wealthier and in higher positions to make decisions. There is not this idea of an intercontinental Jewish conspiracy that is rigging the world towards ruin. That does not exist.
I can only say we disagree.
God bless bless Israel, my friends. Thank you very much. The remaining 15, 20 minutes disagreement, please be bold. Yes.
So first off, I'd like to thank all the Democrats that came here because you guys are some of probably the most democratic people here because you're here to hear a different opinion.